Hello and welcome to another in our series of conversations with very interesting people who have deep experience and exposure in our area of interest here, which is family governance and helping families flourish and thrive. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Jill Gardner today. I met Jill a couple of months ago in beautiful surroundings in the Napa Valley in California, and we had an excellent presentation from Jill in a private context. And so Jill has very kindly offered to reprise some of that, obviously filtered a little bit more for a public audience. So thank you, Jill.
You are so welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
And we're delighted to have you as well. And Jill, I'll just read out a little bit of a bio for those who don't know you. Jill is a fifth generation married-in member of the Laird Norton family. The family has 550 members, currently spanning living generations 4 through 8. Laird Norton Company began in 1855 with land, logs, and lumber on the banks of the Mississippi River in Winona, Minnesota. At the start of the 20th century, the family invested in forested land in the Pacific Northwest. In the late 20th century, the creation of a home building and lumber retail company, Lanoga, and a wealth management company changed their focus once again. With the sale of Lanoga in 2006, the company now owns a diversified portfolio of businesses and is invested in real estate, wealth management, and private equity. Jill has served as a Medina Foundation trustee and in a variety of company family leadership roles for 15 years. For the past 4.5 years, she has been the family president, and as part of this role, she's on the board, chair of the family council, and a Laird Norton Family Foundation trustee. Jill and her husband, Doug, live near Seattle, Washington, but they travel to California and Texas as often as possible to visit their 4 grown children and their grandchildren.
That is correct.
That's all true so far?
All true.
Wow, what an epic story. And I hope they make a movie of it, if they haven't already. We bounced a few ideas as questions for this, and one came to me late, Jill, and you kindly said you'd talk to it. And just to give you the background, in Australia, a lot of the families are first generation, and they have no lived experience of this. So sharing of lived experience is so valuable and helpful to people who really are probably largely in the first generation mindset. And hearing success stories in particular, there's plenty of unfortunate stories, but hearing success stories is inspiring. And I wondered if you, I know you weren't back there
No.
But what can you share, what things that you think the early generations may have done right to establish the foundations which you've built on?
Yeah, I absolutely can. I think I'm a bit of a history enthusiast, so I've really enjoyed diving pretty deeply into the Laird Norton family history. And I would say generation 1, our company started as a cousin consortium, not as a single owner, single founder company. So we had a collaborative mindset from the beginning, and 2 brothers and a cousin were our founders. So of course related to each other, and very closely, and wanted to live in the same city and work together. And they built this together. And so they were, of course, that pioneering, hardworking, the frontier was the new landscape, that generation. But I think that their hard work, they were all about building something. Their lumber, of course, was building Minneapolis and Chicago, and that's what they were doing. And they were very invested in that sort of, pioneering vision. But then the generation 2 tragically lost a couple of the males in the family very young, and the second generation was all women. So I think the thing that generation did right was including in-laws and including them in the business, from generation two has really shaped the way we view the inclusion of married and family members even today. And then generation three, we were very fortunate to have a really someone who you would call entrepreneurial rise to the forefront of leadership. And so his entrepreneurial vision almost brought us back to the beginning, as though we were reinventing ourselves in generation one all over again, or at least that's the effect of his leadership. So I think that's why generation the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in three generations really did not apply to our family. I think his leadership is one of the reasons why that did not pan out for us or become true for us. And then generation four, I think they really kind of supported his leadership vision and were willing to put legs on it over and over again in the investments that they made. And I think generation five, the best thing that my generation has done is because they were really not included in governance early enough. They were not given the information they needed. They were not given the leadership roles that would have probably been ideal for them to have. Generation four sort of was, sort of the we've got it handled generation. And so generation five determined to not repeat that with generation six. And so the way we educate generation six is really largely the determination of generation five. So I would say that that's kind of how I look at our generations.
Wow. So it sounds like it was circumstances for the first couple of generations that dictated some of those choices.
Right.
And dealing with those circumstances as well, because I mean, the more traditional way is first generation is mum and dad. And I say to people, look, that's great, but you're going to go from a monarchy to a democracy, because all of a sudden there's going to be a few different households with their, engaged parties with different agendas perhaps having to come together. So right from the start, the DNA was collaboration, as you said, which is, it's not that easy to teach. And I'm sure there was plenty of, trial and error to work out, get a balance on that. But that's
Right.
amazing and inspiring for everybody to go, hey, we've been collaborating from the start here. That's what's expected.
Mm-hmm. There were a couple of other family members involved initially that pulled out. So it was really the three that remained were the ones, and I mean, I guess collaboration isn't for everyone. And maybe they didn't want to be part of that, that vision, that way of working.
Yeah. Can I ask, and feel free not to answer, but is there any contact with the limbs of the family who did pull out early on, or have people just naturally kind of done their own thing?
No, yeah, they appear in our history book. That's about all I can say about them.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And the other fascinating bit immediately in this chat is the in-law situation. Now, I know we spoke about you marrying in, and you felt that put you in a unique position, which you turned to one of strength, because you were slightly outside the biological family system, and had a different approach and different history. Do you mind? Obviously, this happened back in Gen 2 as well. But Gen 2, sorry, what was the females, not the in-laws, is that right?
Yeah, so the females were not invited to be a part of the Laird Norton company, but their husbands were. And so again, that was the gender dynamics or gender politics of the time. But yeah, and so it's a different situation. I don't think there was ever a time when a married in male couldn't be involved. I think there were times when a married in female would not have been involved. For example, generation four, the married in, women, that was the generation that finally got a woman on the board. And so it's been a kind of a migration, of course, through the gender politics and evolution there. But I think for me, I've been enjoying looking at your book on Be a Better Ancestor. And one of the things that you do talk about, I actually laughed out loud when I read the quote when you said, in-laws are people too. And I was like, indeed, we are people too, but you kind of talk about how, it's sometimes it's like you can have the connection without some of the emotion or some of the dynamics of the system. And I think for me, I will say that my first several years being married into the family, I didn't really pay attention all of that much to what was going on in terms of things to read and meetings and that kind of thing. But then I had kids, and then I was all ears. See, and I think that's the thing with it. When you are married into a system and you have children, then all of a sudden it was never about me. It was always about them. And so then it's about me kind of because I bring them into this. And then I started not only to pay attention, but to sort of read a bit about, family systems theory. And I've been definitely influenced by Edwin Friedman and A Failure of Nerve. But I really find that ability to stay connected, but to not be pulled into the anxiety of the system is something that I have brought to the table, and I've seen other married and family members bring it to the table, because it's a lot harder if you're born into the system to step back from, whatever the emotional, there are always emotionally charged business decision. Those two things can go hand in hand. When we sold our legacy business, it really was a huge emotional lift for a lot of people. And I do think the married and family members helped make sure that transaction got through. It really required that, working together.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for those kind comments. I've studied family systems here as well, and the Bowen side, the theory of that, Murray Bowen. And I can only agree with you. And anxiety is such a funny word, because people will usually deny it. And if you admit that you're feeling anxious, people kind of give you a bit of a wide berth, and it's kind of like you're expected to, take to the bed and come back when you've got through that. But family systems theory is teaching us that anxiety it's kind of a base level. It's very close to the surface for all of us, and we have to acknowledge that we're sometimes making decisions from an emotional place, which again is often denied. And I think by acknowledging it, you're far likely to not make mistakes, and realize the ground that you're walking on. So that's fascinating. And in terms of each generation of the family, there's obviously been kind of quite big shifts, the selling of the original legacy business, and then moving on. Can you talk to how each generation have, if they've made policies and changed them to suit the world that they're living in?
Yeah, we have. I think that there have been a lot of policy conversations over the last 15 years in particular. And I think one of the things that happens is, again, some of that same anxiety can make it really hard to deal with issues that maybe go to who can be included in certain ways, or who has a voice, and how that voice is brought to the forefront. I think one of the things I have noticed is a couple of policy decisions that probably should have been made earlier are in front of us now, and they have to do with the way, basically the way ownership and participation are connected, because we do have this all family summit and all family members are invited. Well, what does that mean as far as who funds it? Who's footing the bill for this, and why, and what is our rationale, and why is that a good fiduciary decision, and that kind of thing. Well, a lot of people have kind of looked at this issue and realized actually we've got a problematic way of handling this. But not wanting to change has to do with, oh, it's just hard. It's hard if, what if someone's upset? Or what if people don't like the change? And is that the right question? I think that it comes down to, what is the job to be done of the summit, and how do we align it strategically with reality so that it does that job, right? And people are always going to be upset. Change is hard. People don't like change, but it's really hard if you're very, very emotionally, from a child, you've been part of sort of the anxiety of the system. It's very hard to step back from that and make some of those decisions. So yeah, I think every generation has had to do it to a certain extent, but I think there's been a lot of pushing off of hard decisions, and we're sort of faced with them now. We're at the point of not being able to push them off much further.
Well, that's fascinating because I mean the human nature is to push off certain decisions,
Right.
and if it's important but not urgent, the business theory is that we're meant to plan for those things. But the planning can be put off as well. And context is so important, and the what ifs and so on. And I agree. It seems not very exciting to spend time creating policies, but they really are foundational blocks which help when the decisions need to be made. To have have had that long run in of a policy, people have the opportunity to speak to it and amend it, um, and so that and live with it. So maybe if I could just ask about that culture around policies, who makes the policies in your family, and how often are they? Is there an opportunity for others to kind of put their hand up and ask questions about it, test them?
Yes, we do. We have a family council, and sometimes a policy discussion will start there. Depending on the nature of the policy, though, it usually doesn't end there. And if it has any sort of fiduciary implication, then it would have to be approved by the board. But our family council is a committee of the board. So oftentimes anything that touches the family will begin with the family council and then end up in front of the board. We are very careful to make sure that our board chair and other board members are privy to our family council meetings, so that we don't, our family council isn't, going rogue and just, trying to come up with our own agenda. We try to find many different channels to let the family know and give the family an opportunity to ask questions. We have in-person channels. Of course, that would be our in-person events like our Next Gen convening and our summit. We also do a variety of things via Zoom. We have what we call cousin conversations, podcast recordings. We also have, after every board meeting, a newsletter is published called Evergreen. And so we try to make sure that there are many different ways to let family members know about, possible changes. Things come in front of the board once by way of kind of information and discussion, and then it's not until the second time that the board would vote. And so there's usually quite a bit of lag there, so that we can make sure to have a lot of family member conversations if it looks like something is going to change.
Very interesting. Well, I might pause there for our audience, and we talk. I'd really like to ask you about the summit and a bit more detail about the communication with the policies and with families. But we'll do a cut there. Thank you very much, Jill.
You're welcome.